Okay, so hello everyone, great to be here. I will be talking about why mixing LiveVue and the Frontend library is a great idea. A few words about me. I'm Jakub Skałecki, I'm coming from Warsaw, Poland. Over 10 years of experience with Python, 3 years with Elixir. And some time ago I created a library called LiveVue. And I know that it sounds exactly the same as Phoenix LiveView, so I will be referring to as LiveVue.js, so we will be able to distinguish. I'm currently building a startup with Elixir called Postline AI. There will be like an example later during the presentation. And just as a side note, I'm always on a lookout for the perfect developer experience, for the perfect stack to create web applications. So let's open this talk by talking quickly about SPAs, about single-page apps. So they are like pretty great. They allow to create dynamic, rich user interfaces and interactions. There's no latency by default, unless some data fetching from the server is needed. They allow to create an app that feels like being a mobile, so like very smooth, very like easy to use, has offline capabilities. Just there's one problem. It's pretty complex to implement. And there are some examples on the right side of modern front-end frameworks like Vue, React, Svelte. You probably know them pretty well. So that's a diagram how it looks like very like generic one. So there's a client. On the client there's some state, and based on that state, a framework renders the DOM, the HTML, and then once user interacts with the interface, there are some events that in turn update that internal state in the client on the browser. And also on the other side, there's the server. And that server is used to initialize the state in the client. But the server is stateless, and it's pretty important for that presentation. So very often there are multiple requests needed to create a local client state and keep it up to date. And also it's pretty challenging to maintain, to create all of these like things on the server. And I would say the client side, the loop of rendering the HTML based on the local state is pretty good. Like it's like, I would say, a standard right now, and mostly people are fine with it. But the server is complex to create the roots to ensure there is no desynchronization, because, for example, what happens if someone else modifies a resource on the server, then by default the local state in the browser is getting out of sync with it. So there are some primitives needed to make that synchronization happen. Okay, and then comes Phoenix LiveView. So like a revolution that we all know, we all love. It simplified the state synchronization because all the state is kept on the server. And there is like a persistent WebSocket connection that allows to update the HTML, the DOM, based on the events emitted by the user. So there is no API to create, to maintain. It's much simpler. Almost no JavaScript necessary. Like I'm pretty sure like many of you don't really like JavaScript. And also it provides a great productivity out of the box. So we all like fell in love with that approach. And this is like a diagram, how it looks like. So we have a WebSocket connection, and all the events coming from the user, from the UI, are being forwarded to the server. Then the server updates its own internal state and sends a div of HTML to the client. So that's pretty great. There's like greatly simplified state synchronization because everything happens on the server. It's much easier to keep it up to date, and also like it allows us to create rich interfaces without like multi-page reload, the full page reload. Just a question. So where exactly is the place for the client state in that approach, right? Because like WebSocket is directly updating the HTML, and events are coming back to the server. So like where we could put something that's local that doesn't require any like server interaction. And just as a note, there's always some client-side state. So just a few examples, like complex form interactions, like adding more records, like a dynamic embedded forms, animations itself. It's something that doesn't require a server connection, server update. UI widgets, like maps, charts, it's all local. It's also a local state. Accessibility, ARIA attributes, they should be updated in real time based on, like, for example, current focus or the state of the interface, but it's not something that should go do the round trip to the server, right? And there's also like many various JavaScript libraries that just have their own local state, and like it would be nice to have an easy way to integrate them. So that's an example from my production application. So we are creating like AI editor with AI support. And on the right side, we have the rich text editor with various preview settings. Like we can make a mobile preview, we can make a you know, the full screen preview, we can display some models with additional settings. So all of these things are local. They are not touching server in any way. They just change the way how user is able to interact with the UI and preview the content. On the other hand, we have also this like middle part, is a chat with AI. So I would say it's like a hybrid thing. So there's a little bit of a local state and animations because, for example, each time when a new message comes in, it's nicely animated so user can understand what's changed. And but all of the messages itself are coming from the server. So there's like a hybrid thing. And what's the official solution for this like challenge? So there are two solutions. One of them is a LiveVue JS module that allows you to put commands into the HTML attributes like phx click, JS hide, JS show, JS toggle class, etc. And then they in turn gets interpreted by the JavaScript Phoenix library, executed on the client side. There is no round trip necessary. I would say it's good for simple things, but as soon as you need something more, like a single click doing a few changes on the website without like any server connection, server round trip, then it's getting a little bit tricky to write them and maintain. And then we can use the second approach, so hooks, Phoenix hooks. And Phoenix hook is basically a JavaScript object that's created together with HTML element by JavaScript library and lets you handle various lifecycle like updates. So for example, when element is mounted, update destroyed, you can perform any arbitrary JavaScript updates that you want. So it's great, just there are still some cons with that approach. One of them, there's a limitation of a single hook per element, so it's a little bit challenging to compose them together to create reusable hooks. But the biggest problem I see with that approach is that like hooks are imperative and not declarative. So what does it mean? It's just a JavaScript, right? So we need to create our own event handlers. We need to create elements on our own if we need them. We need to keep the state synchronized, just writing vanilla JavaScript most of the time. So it's pretty tough to do, especially if we need something more complex. Okay, so there's a diagram of that approach. It's almost the same as the previous one with Phoenix LiveView, WebSocket and client DOM. Just we also have that hook instance on the right side that lets us handle these specific lifecycle events. So we have a possibility to react to changes to the element, for example, when it's mounted, when some attributes are being updated, when it's being destroyed. So what hook can do? Hook can change anything in the HTML. It can attach event handlers. It can send an event to the server. So it's pretty powerful. Just the problem. This is like an opinion I found somewhere on Reddit about hooks. So it's fine when your hook is pretty small, right? It's like easy to to create and maintain. Just if you are trying to create something more complex, then it doesn't really scale and start looking a little bit like jQuery, because it's the same paradigm, right? We are like writing imperative code. We need to instruct computer exactly what should be done at each step, so it's like quite error prone and scales not very well, like unless you're very careful. So I have a question here, like who of you had this problem, like try to create a little bit more complex hook and then was like had the challenge to have it like working nicely and be maintainable? Okay, so like I would say half of you, so that means something. Okay, so that's an example of a complex hook. I'm not sure if it's like visible. I will just try to explain quickly. So on mounted, we are applying some highlighting on the code based on the attribute in the DOM element. So it's very manual. We need to extract the attribute from the element. We need to compare the value and then decide what to do. We need to like create some elements using normal JavaScript methods to access the DOM, to modify it. We need to remember to add our own event listeners, later to remove them, to keep everything synchronized. So it's fine, just it's a lot of, I would say, legwork needed to make it happen, to make it working. So there's a small comparison of like pros of both approaches. So LiveVue has state primarily on the server. It provides a great declarative server-side rendering, so you just change the state and then HTML is being updated for you. It provides like no JS is necessary or very little, and no APIs are necessary. On the other hand, single-page apps, they have state primarily on the client, so that the whole state is being constructed using, for example, like a fetch request to the server. It provides mostly, like all the major frameworks, they provide declarative client-side rendering, so we have that local state, and based on that state, DOM and HTML is being updated. And it's like very clear where is the place for the client-side state, right? Because it's like the default state that we are constructing within this framework. So a big question. Can we like merge them both together? So like have pros of LiveVue and pros of single-page app? And of course, there's a solution. So a little bit of history. First library that like kind of paved the way was LiveVue. It was created, I believe, around 2 years ago, and it allows to seamlessly synchronize the assigns from the LiveVue process into the front-end framework, right? So it's very, very simple, and it's like updated in the real time as these assigns are updated in your process. Then they are also updated as props in the component. So I fell in love with that approach. Just it had like two things to improve. Like so, I had to improve them. So one of them was to like change Svelte into Vue, because it's of course my preference, but also you know, better to have a little bit more choices. And another one is to replace ESBuild with Vite, like a different bundler. And so I created this. It got some traction, and then after like few more months, LiveReact was created. So right now we have, like I would say, full coverage of main framework, modern frameworks. There's also some other solutions. They are a little bit like less popular, but I have to mention, for example, LiveState, that allows to just use a normal SPA framework and then synchronize some part of the state from the process. So it's also like a viable option. So a diagram, how it works. So you remember that previously LiveVue was sending a div of HTML, right? And then directly updating the HTML on the client. With that approach, it's a little bit different. So LiveVue is sending a props div. So just updating all the props that are being passed to the top level component, be it like Vue or React. And then in turn, the framework like Vue updates the HTML renders and updates the HTML. And there's a very clear place for the local state, because if you have a component that's like, for example, defined in Vue, you have props coming from the server, so it's very clear they are coming from the server, and you have a clear place to provide local state using the primitives provided to you by the framework. And then in turn, you have these events coming from the UI. You can handle them on the client side if you want. So like the no latency thing is very easy to accomplish, but also you can forward them to the server. And in turn, it might trigger a server state update that will be then propagated back to props. So I'm thinking it's like a very powerful paradigm of way of building apps in Elixir. So how it looks like, I want to show like a very simple example with a counter. So we just have a single assign count. We have an event handler that just increases it by some value defined by the event. And render function is something that's probably the most interesting here. So there's a view component. So I will be providing examples about LiveVue because it's my child, right? So that's how it's working. You just have to pass all the props you want to have on the front end in a normal way, as you would do with Higgs components. So in this case, we are passing count. We also have two additional things we have to define. Like vComponent is just a name of the component on the front-end side that should be rendered in place of that element. And also we need to pass socket. So it's only necessary if we are doing this in a LiveVue and not in a dead view. It's used to distinguish if server-side rendering is needed or not. Then we have the view component. So I'm not sure like how many of you are like familiar with that syntax. So I will quickly explain. We define the props. So in this case, there's just a single prop coming from the server. We have the local state. So it's a diff that can be updated like locally without any server interaction. And then we are rendering our template. So in this case, it doesn't matter if we are using rendering a prop coming from the server or we are rendering a local variable, it all works in the same way, right? And we can use events to update these values. So for example, in this case, input is using vModel provided by Vue. That's in turn on in change updates the diff. It's a local update, so without any server interaction. But there's also a phx click, so something you all know pretty well, that we are like allows us to send an event to the server with a value of diff. So that's pretty simple. There are a few utils provided by a LiveVue library that makes it a little bit more like straightforward to do. So there's also live instance available in your template. It's basically just a hook instance. So everything that you can do with a hook instance, you can do here. So for example, push event is there at your disposal, or like access to live socket if you need it. And the last way of doing this is to use LiveVue utility from LiveVue package. Then we just define a live variable. And then we can, it's the same, right? It's just the hook instance. So in JavaScript, we are able to push events to the server and then also like handle them if you want, right? The replies coming from the server. So how it works. So as I'm changing the input, right? Then the diff is being updated. And as you can see, it's a client-side state. So there is no server communication right now. Everything is local. But as soon as I will click like increase counter, then the server side is being updated, right? So it's like super transparent and super like fluid. So you don't have to worry about this too much. It's all provided for you by the library. So that's like a basic example how to use LiveVue. And I think it might be interesting for you to understand how it works under the hood, because the very core is pretty simple. So I prepared a few snippets to explain. That's a view component from the library. I hope the highlighting is like not an obstacle. Just what's important here, like few things, right? We are just rendering a single div on the HTML side from the Phoenix. It has a few special attributes. So one of them is data name. Data name basically defines the name of a component that should be rendered in this place by JavaScript part. We have data props. So these are like basically JSON stringified props and sent to the client. We have information if server-side rendering was being used or not, also to like handle it properly on the client side. And two very important instructions to the LiveVue: phx update ignore. So LiveVue won't try to update the HTML that's like under this element. So Vue can take over and manage this on its own. And phx hook is like a hook defined within the library that will handle all of the lifecycle events. Okay, so how it works under the hood, part 2. When installing LiveVue library, you are asked to provide like this snippet somewhere in your code base, like preferably in the assets, somewhere in the assets. So it's like a create LiveVue, and you have two methods to implement. One of them is to resolve, and resolve means to take name of the component and give the view component that should be used in a given place, right? So that's an example how it can be implemented with it. It's pretty easy. We are just trying to find all of the view components in your assets directory. We load them like in an eager way, so like there's a single bundle. And then there's a utility find component, just basically trying to find your component based on the suffix of the path. So you can use either like the full path to the component or just the name of the component if there are no duplicates. And another thing is setup. So it's a method used just when we have everything needed to initialize the component. And this is a place where it's like being initialized. So it's also pretty standard. It's just a way to create a new Vue instance in the client. So you create an app with a render function that renders your component with given props. You mount it somewhere in the HTML. So in this case, we are always mounting it under the element. So the hook element that's like being associated with a hook, and we return it. So it's a place where you can customize it to your needs. So you can add any plugins you want, like Pina. You can add directives. You can add some globals. So it's pretty easy to tailor it to your needs. And the last piece of the puzzle is a LiveVue hook. So take a look how simple it is. We take the component name from attributes. We resolve it using the method we just defined a moment ago. Then we take the props. They are also coming from the attribute. We parse them because it's a JSON, so we need to parse them into like a JavaScript object. And then we are creating a reactive object from Vue. So it allows to track the changes to these attributes. So in turn, Vue is able to update everything that's dependent on these values. Then we create our app, and it's done. And we have like we are rendering correctly our Vue instance in a place of an element. Updated, super simple. We are just updating the props the same way as we were like doing it in mount. And on destroyed, we unmount the whole app, so it's like properly cleaned up. Like in real world, it's a little bit more complex because we are also supporting server-side rendering. We are supporting slots and some other like additional things. But like the core is very simple. I think you should be able to understand this without any problems. So what are the features of LiveVue that are like the most important? So I just very briefly try to go through all of them. End-to-end reactivity, so it's very like transparent. You don't need to worry about this. Server-side rendering is also configured for you by default. It's just like a single Boolean to like tell if it should be like server-side rendered or not. Just a side note, it's not that important for the user experience, like from my own like testing, because all of the props are embedded in your HTML when you are doing the initial render. So the usual problem with the single page apps is the waterfall, that when the app is being loaded, then multiple requests are going to the server to fetch all the data, right? And here it's not an issue because all of the props needed to render the component are already embedded in the HTML, so it's almost instant. Like the act of creation, the view instance is I don't know, 50 milliseconds after the JavaScript is loaded, so it's very, very fast. LiveVue also supports lazy loading, so you can split your bundle into multiple smaller files. It's all handled as it should be, in a very efficient way. There's a sigil that lets you create your view components directly inside the Elixir module, so it's alternative approach to Hicks. We also create many Phoenix utilities, so you have access to links, to sending and handling events, to form handling in an easy way. Dead views are also supported, slots are supported, so this was a little bit tricky to implement, but you are able to provide a slot to view component, define it, use your core components from your project, and it will work. It will be also updated on the view side, right? And we also, LiveVue also provides amazing developer experience, and this is something I wanted to talk about for a brief second. So why I'm saying there's amazing developer experience? Because of this, because of Vite. So it's an alternative solution to ESBuild, and it's pretty smart because it's not building a bundle in development. It's using native ES modules to serve your files, so there is no initial warm-up time where the bundle has to be created, and later when you update your JavaScript files, not the whole bundle, the whole bundle doesn't need to be recreated, but rather only very granular changes are being pushed to your client. And also I implemented something that allows to use the power of that library for server-side rendering. So it's also very efficient. And I hopefully will be able to show you an example, how it looks like. So I have our counter. I have the code. So hopefully when I will update it, it should be instantly reflected on the screen. So I'm not sure if you noticed, but update was instant. And it's nice because the state is also preserved, right? We have our counter by 6, we have our div, and we can make any changes to the code, right? And it just updates what we have there without resetting the state. So it's nice. On the client side, we have this hot module reload, but with a small fix or small change in the config of Phoenix LiveView, we also have it on the server side. So I'm not sure if you're, so this is not about the library, but it's a feature that Phoenix has as well. So take a look, we can do something like this. So it should increase the count by 5. And take a look, the div was reset because the view instance was recreated because the live view was re-rendered, but the div itself, the count stays. So thanks to this, we have a full, stateful hot reload for both backend and frontend. So I think it's exactly what we need to create our apps in an efficient way, right? Not waiting for an update, for a build, but rather just doing our things and seeing the results almost instantly. Okay, so a few words about how to integrate it into your project. There are 2 ways of doing this that are in my opinion, proper. So either we need a few isolated client-side components, be it a rich text editor, live preview, or a very complex form that we just want to use in a few places in our app. Or we can go with a totally opposite approach. So we ditch Hicks completely, we almost don't use it at all. And instead, each live view renders a single top-level view component. So then Phoenix LiveView kinda do not render HTML at all. Is just rather used to update the props and handle the events. and all the rendering is handled by Vue. And why that approach is like, these two approaches are recommended, because mixing them together like too much is not necessarily a great idea, because if you have like half of your code base in Vue and half of your code base in Higgs, then you have some duplication. For example, if you need buttons or inputs or something else needed in both sides, then you need to duplicate these components in both like Vue side and the Phoenix side, and this is like a little bit hard to maintain. And as a side note, server-side rendering might get slow if you have lots of Vue components in your Higgs. Then they are being rendered on a server one by one. There is no easy way to make it in parallel. So just my like kind of recommendation to go with one of these two approaches. Okay, and this is also something I'm using in my current project. So I'm a big fan of slicing your app by functionality, so keep things that change together, close together. And in my case, I'm just collocating top-level Vue components and LiveVues next to each other. So I know exactly that like given component is not a reusable thing, but rather it's getting its props from the server. I'm able to like create them quickly because they are in a single place. I'm able to remove and move them around also very easily. And it works pretty well, at least for my needs. There's also a solution of using V sigil, so you can define your Vue component in your Elixir module instead of using Higgs. Just developer experience is not fully there because highlighting is easy. Highlighting itself is easy, but all the auto completion or the linter support, TypeScript support, making it work, it's a little bit more hassle. So I just need to spend some time on a VS Code extension to support all of these things, but I think it should be possible. And also, one thing that's coming soon, it's on a branch right now, but like hopefully will be stable very soon. So I'm trying to reach a feature parity of Phoenix JS library. There are many things that Phoenix provides for you, like inputs for, or links, or event handling and stuff like this. And I want to make them like as easy to use in Vue as is using Higgs, right? So this is an example of using form utils that like coming soon. We have a method useLiveForm. It provides you three things, like a submit method, provides fields, and is submitting. Then we need to define like what's the form that's being used. So like form is basically on the server side exactly the same as you are doing right now with forms in Phoenix. So change set to form, assign, and render. And here you also need to define the change events and submit events, right? And later there is a short example how to get fields for your form. So either like it's a nested field or like a simple object. And the language and instructions in this case, they have all of the necessary things that you need to work with given field. So errors, value, status if it's dirty or not. So that's an example of how the template looks like. So we have a submit method in form. We have vModel on language. We render errors here, right? So there's a field called like language errors. We have all of them coming from the server transparently for you, so you don't have to worry about this. We can display the error message, and we can like access some state of the form, right? So it lets you validate a form on the server in Vue without any problems. Okay, what are the drawbacks of that approach? So JSON serialization is necessary, so you need to either define a mapping functions to map your structs into like plain objects, or provide a protocol for encoding. Testing is a little bit more complex because you are not working with HTML, but rather with props, and JS bundle size will increase. And the demo time, right? So like you are free to scan this QR code if you are brave enough. And like as you are scanning it, I'm just showing it off because that whole presentation is created in LiveVue, as you probably already guessed. so I can do anything I want on the client side. There are some things coming from the server, and it allows me to embed examples directly into the presentation. So that first example is like, demo time. Oh, crap, okay. Yeah, there are like some emojis that you can add on your phones and show them on the screen. So all of the emojis are local side, are only in the browser, right? And we are handling events coming from Phoenix. As you can see, it's still working, so that's good, right? And also we have a small graph or number of connected users. So how many of you are online right now? So graph is like a off-the-shelf graph library for Vue. It allows to like zoom things, to move them around. It's very like easy to integrate, but the data itself is coming from the socket, right? So I'm just taking snapshots of all the seconds when, like how many of you are online, and it's like updated here. Okay, so like the summary, so I'm almost closing. What it gives you, it gives a clear place for declarative client-side state. You have access to the big ecosystem of front-end libraries. It might be a little bit easier to hire Vue React Svelte developers, or maybe you have some developers in your companies that are already familiar with these technologies, so it's easier to integrate them into your project instead of trying to teach them Higgs. LLMs are better than Vue in Vue than in Higgs. That's my experience. So it's also like a pretty big advantage, I would say. And also it provides a great developer experience with it. So like the future plans, easier installation, better optimizations of diffs, feature parity of Phoenix JavaScript library, like streams, files, uploads. Yeah, that's it from me. Thank you, and hopefully you learned something new from this presentation.
Thank you so much for presenting for us. And just like I mentioned in the beginning, I encourage you to ask your questions in the applications. And I'm going to read one of them. We're very tight on schedule, so we only have time for one. Is there a mix-only way to use LiveVue that is without having to depend on NPM?
No, not yet. So you have to install Vue somehow in your application, and NPM is the easiest way to do it, because otherwise I would need to provide like all of these assets on my own. On the other hand, I'm really working on Igniter installer that will let you install the whole library into your project in one command. So right now there's a couple of steps you need to do to have it working, but once the Igniter installer is there, it will be just like one single command, and you could start using Vue components in your project. So yeah, like I don't really see a way around like NPM, but like as soon as you want to create something a little bit more complex, you will probably need some packages from NPM anyway. So not only Vue, but also, I don't know, some charts or some forms or something else. Yeah. So